I just think they let Draymond set the tone, get under their skin. They started barking at officials, which is when they do that, that's when they generally play bad because they focus on that as opposed to the game. So all the bad Celtic things that have come up this season came out last night. I mean, they're going to have to adjust to the physicality. I think Draymond did a great job of setting the tone in the first opening possession by drawing that jump ball on Al Horford. I thought that set the tone.
Yep.
But he was playing football out there, and the Celtics. Then Draymond was the key. I mean, that first quarter, I think he drew consecutive fouls on Williams, Tatum, and Brown. I think Draymond drew 7 to 8 fouls last night. I mean, that's just huge.
Yeah.
Because, one, you're putting him in foul trouble in the bonus. Secondly, you're getting to the line, although he's not a great free throw shooter. And then you're giving the momentum back to your team. So I thought Draymond was a major factor. Did he toe the line across? Of course he does. That's what Draymond does. That's what he's made his living off of, talking mess, getting in your face, maybe setting a couple of illegal picks. But the Celtics were bothered by that. But that's what happens. I mean, this is not a pretty game. The Celtics like playing pretty. They've got to get a little bit, down and dirty with the Warriors, especially Draymond in that situation.
And the number one villain in Boston, that would be Draymond Green. He really set the tone Sunday night when he tied up Al Horford on the first play of the game. The young Celtics made the mistake of talking trash to Draymond.
Growing up the way I did, you can't survive if you can't talk on the court. You can go out there quiet if you want to. You play as good as you want. If you're quiet, they're going to think you're soft.
You respond to fire with fire, right? I mean, we just got to, turn around and do the same thing. If he's going to come in here and try to be physical, this is our house, and we got to protect it.
That shit Draymond Green was doing during the 80s, he got knocked the fuck out.
See, but that's a whole different. That's a difference in our basketball.
Yeah,
our basketball is different.
This has been up like, oh, the motherfucker with the ball down.
Boy, this motherfucker, he done took him out the air and broke him all. Boy, you'd have put him all the way over there. You'd have put him all the way over there.
One thing that baffles me about the 80s or the 90s or whatever you want to call when basketball was so much more physical is some of the guys that be talking weren't the guys that was punching people. Like they act like, guys was just walking around the court like I'm hitting this guy in the nose. There were a few guys back then that would lay you out, that would knock you out, that would foul you and get thrown out the game. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn. But everybody running around acting like they were that. Y'all were getting bullied. And so it baffles me when every guy, just because they played in the 80s, just because they played in the 90s, is like, man, if you played in our day, you get knocked out. Like, no, not really, because it wouldn't be you. So, okay, you saying Rick Mahorn would have knocked me out. Rick Mahorn probably knocks you out. Like, Bill Laimbeer probably lays you out. So were there enforcers of that time? Of course. Would they have knocked you out? Of course. Their fine was also $2. Like, it's just not the same day and age. If I go knock somebody out, I probably get fined $1 million. Like, it just don't work the same. And so, when guys get to making these comparisons or talking about, if you played in this day and age, like, yeah. And if you played in this day and age, you would have had to be way more skilled than you were. And it's just different, Like comparing the physicality to the game and everybody acting like they were just the most physical and brutal enforcers. It's like everybody acting like they shoot the ball like Steph Curry today. It's like then it was physical. Now it's shooting. Everybody can't shoot the ball. Imagine me in 20 years like, man, if you played in my day, you had to shoot. Guys did shoot better and more. But that don't mean you shot that well. And so it just baffles me when guys get out here talking and they ain't got, we got YouTube and you can pull up them highlights and they ain't got no YouTube fights. Like, you see them on the court.
Yesterday, a video surfaced of Cedric Maxwell and Gary Payton discussing what would have happened to Draymond Green if he played in the 80s and tried to pull off his shenanigans. Turns out Green saw that video, and today he responded to Maxwell.
I saw what Cedric Maxwell said. And, you know, one thing that baffles me about the 80s or the 90s or whatever you want to call when basketball was so much more physical is some of the guys that be talking weren't the guys that was punching people. You know, like they act like, you know, guys was just walking around the court like I'm hitting this guy in the nose. There were a few guys back then that would lay you out, that would knock you out, that would foul you and get thrown out the game. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn. But everybody running around acting like they were that. Y'all were getting bullied.
Max, your thoughts?
That's really interesting that he pick out a name like Rick Mahorn. And he would pick out, I think more than anybody, he goes on and said, Bill Laimbeer. Didn't we see Bill Laimbeer get beat down in front of us in the Garden with Robert Parrish out there?
Right.
And you can talk about the 80s all you want. It's not about me and him. Here's this punch, and I'm over here. I'm trying to grab Charles Barkley by the neck. I'm putting him in a chokehold. This is the physicality of a game. Okay, let's see this. Wait a minute. Rick Laimbeer's intimidated. Yep, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, and then I asked Robert Parrish, I said, Robert, did you see anybody? Oh, man, that makes me sick right now. James Worthy pushed me back. But that was all right because we have one more game to play. It was fine. And this is still in litigation. I hope that white man is still alive. I'm not sure. But that was a whole nother thing that my teammates looked at. And I asked Robert Parrish about this punch, and I said, Robert, weren't you afraid that other players are going to come over and attack you? He said, I was thinking about that, but that's what they thought about him. They let me beat him down. So I don't worry about all these things. And again, it's not about Draymond Green and I, but I was just pointing out, in the 80s, there were some guys like Kermit Washington, there was Akeem Olajuwon, there were a bunch of guys who were mean, tough guys. And a lot of the shenanigans that's going on in the game right now with Draymond, that wouldn't have been tolerated during the 80s. Gary Payton, he identified, he said that.
And also, but the retaliations wouldn't have been, you know, in Philadelphia, Max, when you went and hit that fan, we just showed the video, were you even thrown out of the game or did you keep playing?
Came back and started playing in the game. It was that's it. Just break it up, guys. Let's go for it. There was no rule then, Felder. Right. There was a Cedric Maxwell rule that was out there about going in the stands later on. But at that time, went in the stands, gave the guy a little forearm shiver, came back in, said some choice words, and went on and started playing in the game. Okay, so that's the toughness of the game. Well, it's completely different.
If someone did that now, they'd be suspended for the rest of the year and fined $10 million. So
that's really true, and it's more again about, you know, that situation. I understand what Draymond's saying, but he keeps saying about nobody punched nobody. You asked Charles Barkley what happened when he and I got in a fight down in Golden State when I was in L.A. with the Clippers. Norm Nixon happened to look at that thing. He calls me all the time and said, you know what, I'll testify, and I'll say you punched him a couple of times. So, look, I've been in enough of those. So Draymond wasn't even born when I was around playing, was he? I don't. Max, let me see. Let me do the math here.
Max, don't get caught up.
Ask your daddy who I was, okay? That's how that goes. I see Draymond behind me.
Okay.
But don't act like it wouldn't have been in the 80s. He would have been knocked out.
Hey, come on, Sid. Stop that, Sid.
Hey. I watched y'all team and played against y'all team, and I'm going to tell you, like on the real, they had about 5-6 guys on y'all team that would knock you out, and you was one of them, right?
Well, I think also, Cedric, would you say at this era, I mean, we're talking comparison eras, two things that I would add. One, it's kind of like hockey. There's about 3 guys on a team that's their job. There's no job for that in the NBA now. So there were jobs like you come in, you got to be physical. Yeah. That's your only job, is to be physical.
Well, let me tell you the part that insulted me, and this was, and I talked to Draymond or anybody else. They talked about, Draymond said, well, if you got thrown out of a game during that time, you only could pay $2. Well, you know what? That's an insult to anybody who played with me at that particular time. Because we stood on the shoulder of giants.
Yeah.
And the reason he's making $30 million, he got on my shoulders and somebody else's shoulders.
Yeah.
And you don't be disrespectful. I'm going to quote a famous Chinese philosopher here, Kevin Garnett.
Oh, wow.
What Kevin Garnett said?
I didn't even know he was Chinese.
Well, you know it now. What Kevin Garnett said was, respect these years.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, when you look at things you talk about, I'll say this. There's only been
32 Finals MVPs, and damn it, I'm one of them.
Okay. All right.
First, for the visiting Golden State Warriors, from UCLA, number 5, Draymond Green. From Kansas, number 22, Andrew Wiggins. From Washington State, number 11, Clay Johnson. From Michigan State, number 23, Draymond Green. And from Davidson, number 30, Stephen Curry. The head coach of the Golden State Warriors is Steve Kerr.
Harris with a turnaround in the lane. No good. Maxwell and Dawkins going at it, and now Maxwell goes into a foul and goes after a fan. Maxwell goes after a fan, and there's Bedlam in the stands here, and Bill Fitch is over there. Dawkins and Bill Fitch and Ford and Maxwell, and someone said something to Maxwell, and he went in with a vengeance.
The thing that happens in this situation, it looks like the players were going to go into it, but as soon as the fans got involved, the players get together. It becomes a group again of one group, and they got together to try to stop it, and it could have got real nasty over there.
That's the fraternal aspect of this thing, because when you're dealing with fans, as you say, that's another story, and I think Darryl Dawkins, to his credit, went in as a peacemaker.
Exactly right. He and Maxwell were pushing one another. As soon as the outsiders got involved, which was the ball.
Pick it up
There
on
it
this
is here.
side.
Maxwell aggressive, knocks Tony down. Here's the push. Dawkins pushes him down. He pushes him into the fan. The fan gets excited. Says something to Maxwell. Maxwell went after the fan.
Maxwell was wrong. Cornbread Maxwell was wrong because the fans pay their way in, and they can say anything they want. You just can't go after a fan who yells at you. Now, of course,
I'm assuming you're talking Grant Williams. Of course you are. I think when you see that, when you see a guy say, man, I grew up watching him, you appreciate it. Because, you know, that's why you work. You work to create a path for the next young guy. Like, my goal when I came in here was to create a path for Grant Williams. And so to hear him say that, it's an honor. Like, and so I don't take that for granted one bit. When a guy comes and starts, when you say that and then you start talking junk to me, then yes, I'm going to say something about that, of course. But, like, I didn't say anything about that game one because he wasn't talking to me. Like, I'm not going to go watch his press conference where he gives me props, where he appreciates my game, and then go throw it in his face. Like, that's whack to me. Like, I'm not doing that. That's just not how I roll. LeBron James, when I was wearing LeBron James sneakers in my first 1, 2, 3 years and playing against him, he didn't throw in my face like, dude, you got on my sneakers. This is just not something you do. Once he start going at me and it got chippy and, you know, he's yap. And all right, bro, like, you can't say that and then come and say this. Like, that just doesn't add up to me. So then you just go wherever you got to go. And for me, that's where I'm going. Do I feel like, nah, man, I shouldn't have said that. That was too, nah. It's the heat of the battle. You know, you're out there on the court. You get to feeling sorry for him or yourself if you want to. It's going to turn on you. So, no, you just keep it moving.
Third row in the middle.
I'm also someone who, you know, things happen on the basketball court. Things are said on the basketball court. It's the basketball court. I then leave the basketball court. I go home to my life, my normal life. But, you know, I am not one that's like, oh, man, such and such did this on the court, and now I need to feel a way I like. It's the basketball court.
and a moving screen call on Grant Williams as Draymond Green draws the foul. Green and Williams going face to face again. They did it in game 2 in San Francisco. Grant Williams is young, but he's not one to hold back talking. Oh, he picks up his first.
The NBA Finals, and when you're playing for a championship, it really is about your mental toughness and your mental focus and being able to totally 100% concentrate on your opponent, shutting him down, understanding their offensive and defensive schemes. And anytime you lose that focus or that concentration, and you're talking about Cedric Maxwell, and you're talking about podcast, and you're talking about the fans.
Don't talk about X and O's, though.
Then you have lost, you have really lost your concentration and your focus. And where does that show up? That show up in the box score in a game like tonight where you play 34 minutes, you have 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 points. Draymond Green does that in a grade school game, not in the NBA Finals. So when you talk about focus, this is what the NBA Finals is about. And right now, he has lost focus in terms of concentrating on beating the opponent. He's not talking about Jaylen Brown. He's not talking about Tatum. He's not talking about Marcus Smart. He's talking about podcasts, and he's talking about Cedric Maxwell and the fans. Concentration needs to come back on the Boston Celtics players who you're playing against out on the floor.
You really think that the comments
100%.
You really believe that?
And I'm actually happy he saw that. I'm actually happy he saw that because for the rest of his life, we will have the opportunity to talk about, you remember when I went through X, Y, and Z when you were 5, and you remember those people were saying this and saying that. Like, it's okay. You can get through it. Ain't no big deal. So that's all it is for me. Yes, my family is livid, and trust me, I get it. I totally understand. But for me, who's raising a young black man in America, for him to understand how this world works, for him to understand how America works, as opposed to how they say America works, that was just another example of it. And so, no harm, no foul. Fuck Draymond. Fuck Draymond. Fuck you too.